Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to dive right in today because there's a huge shift happening in the global economy. You've got the old guard, the traditional powers, and they're slowing down. At the same time, a whole new group of countries is hitting the accelerator, big time.
So let me ask you something. When you think about the engine that powers the world's economy, who pops into your head? For, decades, the answer was always the same, right? Pretty predictable. Well, that answer, it's changing. And honestly, it's changing way faster than most people realize.
Okay, check this out. I want you to focus on just one number because it really tells you almost everything you need to know. That number is 3, as in 3 times. By 2028, one group of countries is on track to grow almost 3 times faster than another. The big question is, who's who in this scenario?
And there's your answer. We're talking about the BRICS Plus alliance, and they are forecast to absolutely blow past the G7 nations. Look, this isn't just a tiny lead we're talking about. This is a massive, massive gap opening up a divergence that could literally rewrite the rules of global economic power for the next generation. So yeah, let's get into it.
All right, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the big picture shift. Then we'll see why the G7's engine is kind of sputtering. After that, we'll check out the new kids on the block, the BRICS Plus nations. Then we'll put them side by side to see just how big this divergence is. And finally, we'll dig into why this is all happening.
You know, for the better part of a century, it was pretty simple. A handful of countries, the big industrial powers, they basically ran the show. They set the rules for pretty much everything. Trade, finance, you name it. And that group is, of course, the G7. For a long, long time, they were the undisputed core of the global economy. But that's not the case anymore. There's a new group on the scene, and they are seriously shaking things up.
So let's talk about that old guard, the G7. How are they actually doing? Well, if you look at the forecasts, we're talking numbers from places like the IMF, the picture is, well, it's not great. The data is pointing to a really clear slowdown.
I mean, just take a look at these projections. It's pretty modest growth across the board, right? The US is maybe hitting 2%, but then you've got powerhouses like Germany and Japan that are struggling to even crack 1%. When you average it all out, the whole G7 bloc is struggling to get much higher than, say, 1.8% growth. It's just not a lot of gas in the tank.
And you gotta ask, why? What's going on here? This isn't just a bad quarter or a little dip. Experts are pointing to some really deep structural problems. We're talking about things like aging populations, meaning fewer workers, plus huge amounts of government debt that kind of stifles new investment, and, of course, the slow creep of deindustrialization that's moved jobs and factories elsewhere. Okay, so that's one side of the coin. Now let's flip it over and look at the BRICS Plus alliance, because this is where all the action is. This is where the economic momentum is really building.
And you can't just call them emerging markets anymore. That's old news, especially now that they've expanded. This group represents a huge chunk of the world's population, and they're actively trying to build their own thing, a new economic system that's not so reliant on the traditional Western powers.
Leading the pack? India. Just incredible. You've got this young, dynamic workforce, a tech sector that's just on fire, and their economy is projected to grow at a whopping 6.8% a year. That's huge.
And it's not just the original BRICS countries either. Take one of the newcomers, Ethiopia. They're also showing some incredible momentum, with growth forecast as high as 6%. This shows the depth of the new alliance.
Yeah, and I know we hear all the time about how China's economy is slowing down. But you have to put that in perspective, right? A slowdown for them is still 5% annual growth. I mean, most G7 countries would kill for numbers like that. They haven't seen growth like that in decades.
It's not always about those explosive high numbers either. Let's take a closer look at Brazil. You can see the story from 2022 right through the forecast to 2028. It shows this pattern of real resilience. After some solid growth, it's projected to stabilize around a very steady 2.5%. Now that might not sound as flashy as 6 or 7%, but it consistently beats the G7 average. That's the key. It shows the whole bloc has this underlying strength and stability.
So, okay, let's put these two stories together. You've got the G7 slowing down on one side and the BRICS Plus alliance speeding up on the other. When you see them side by side, wow, the picture of this great divergence just snaps into focus.
This chart just says it all, doesn't it? I mean, look at that. Over on the left, that little bar is the G7, barely getting to 2%. And then on the right, that's BRICS Plus. It's just towering over the G7 with growth projected somewhere between 4 and 5%. The gap isn't just big, it's getting bigger. That's a massive difference in economic horsepower.
Which brings us to the final and maybe most important question. Why? What's actually driving this huge gap? What's behind it all? Well, it's really a tale of two completely different economic situations.
Think of it like this. The G7 is running into some serious headwinds. They're dealing with those aging workforces we talked about, high debt levels, all things that slow you down. But the BRICS Plus nations, they've got these incredible tailwinds at their back. They've got youth, they've got tons of natural resources, and they have this real political drive to carve out their own path and trade more with each other.
And this is so much bigger than just GDP numbers on a chart. It's about a fundamental shift in who has influence in the world. There's this great quote from an analysis that really nails it. It says, "This is a turning point where BRICS Plus isn't on the sidelines anymore. They're moving right to the center stage, not just for the economy, but maybe for how the whole world is run."
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that a massive, historic rebalancing of the world economy is happening right now. It's not a question of if anymore, it's just a question of how fast. Which leaves us with one final, huge thought to chew on. When the money moves, other things tend to follow. So as all this economic power shifts, what else is going to shift with it? Think about political power, cultural influence, even military strength. What happens when all of that starts to change too?